What's up guys, Drew here doing another Obscurity review for Punch Punch Magic. Now last time I said I was going to delve further into the Halo killer genre, and well, that's exactly what I'm doing this time by doing the game Pariah. Pariah is a game developed by Digital Extremes. Yes, that Digital Extremes, way back in 2005. I think the release date was May 3rd, and it was also published by Groove Games. Now at that point, Digital Extremes hadn't really done much. They've done some ports of the Unreal games. They'd done a lot of work with the Unreal Engine, but they hadn't actually made many games themselves, especially nothing really noteworthy. So this was their first big game, and you don't ever hear about it anymore. I wonder why that is. I wonder why. This game was heavily hyped as the next evolution in first-person shooters, and it definitely ragged a lot on the old Halo games, trying to say that they were a Halo killer. It was actually marketed as a Halo killer. Like, you can read interviews and stuff like that where they explicitly say, we're aiming for Halo, we're going to take them down. This game is a bit of a mess, so I'm going to actually split this review into sections. I'm going to go into the story first, and then I'm going to go into the gameplay. So let's go ahead and get into the story. Like almost all of the games at the time, you enter your profile name and then the game gets underway. The game starts with a dreary title sequence where we hear a conversation between two seemingly defeated people. At first this seems out of place, but it ends up foreshadowing the end of the game in a pretty misleading way. We are then introduced to the main character of the game, Jack Mason, who is a field medic. He's a bit of a dweeb.
Doesn't look that bad from up here.
Mason is tasked with transporting this infected prisoner off of Earth into the Alliance in space. Yes, you are on Earth, which was transformed into a giant prison by a group called the Shroud and has since been taken over by the Alliance. Who are the Shroud, might you ask? Well, all we really learn about them until the end of the game is that they were a faction fighting against the Alliance in a war, or as Mason puts it,
it hadn't even been a war officially, more like a domestic situation 30 years ago.
That's pretty much all you have to go on at this point as far as backstory is concerned, which is something that becomes a problem later on. While transporting the prisoner, your ship is shot down by a land-air missile, causing it to crash to the ground. After a surprisingly well-done establishing shot, you are given control of Mason. I like to give credit where credit is due, and this intro sequence is actually pretty good. I like the camera angle that they used here. It makes you feel engrossed in the action. It's effective at making you just as disoriented as the main character. The next tutorial sequence does a good job of teaching you how to heal yourself, a huge mechanic of the game. Moments later, we are introduced to Karina, the infected prisoner, and some of the worst dialogue delivered yet.
Who are you? What's going on?
Whoa. Easy with that thing.
Karina is inexplicably shot by the pilot of the crash ship, which then causes Mason to become infected with the virus. Was there no better way to have Mason get infected? Really? This irked me for some reason. There is no subtlety here. It doesn't help that the game never really explains what the infection is, so from this point on, this plot point is basically forgotten until the last minutes of the game. This feels so shoehorned in just to make the ending make sense, but more on that later. You are then given a gun and must defend Karina from the scavengers. Amidst the chaos, though, your pilot is killed and Karina escapes. It is now up to Mason to find her and ensure that she doesn't spread the infection to anyone else. From here, I actually had a lot of fun for the next half hour. The levels are surprisingly large for the time, and the game looks good for something on the original Xbox from 2005. It's lacking in some areas, namely sound design and voice acting, but I didn't really care that much because I was having fun. At this point, I was totally on board with the game. It seemed to be doing everything right. It had satisfying combat, a surprising amount of detail in the world, cool weapons and upgrades, and a story that I was excited to hear more about. The beginning of this game is just an overall pleasant and welcoming experience, if you ignore all the blood and gore. I was so ready to continue on and learn more about this game's story and its world. You finally meet up with Karina again, only to have her escape from you once again via a bogey, or what this game calls a Humvee. You track down a bogey of your own and chase after her. This is the moment where things started to go downhill. At the time, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about the driving controls felt off. After a while, I just accepted the fact that the driving controls were pretty awful, to the point where I would actually rather walk the long distances than drive them. You control your direction by looking around and move forward by pushing the left stick forward. Sound familiar? Well, if it doesn't, that's the exact same way that vehicles are controlled in Halo. Those basic controls themselves are fine, but the problem comes from the fact that you have to aim a weapon and control your driving with the same stick, which means you'll either never hit anything or are constantly running into everything. Have you ever flown a helicopter in GTA 5? The helicopter with the Gatling gun on the front? You know how terrible it is to try and aim that thing? Yeah, you get the same feeling here. After a while, I eventually just resorted to running people over, getting out and mowing down the rest with the guns I had on me instead of the massive guns on the vehicles. Not only did the guns on me do more damage, but I could also take a lot more damage than the vehicle itself. This isn't too much of a problem now, but it becomes a serious problem later in the game. Every vehicle feels like it was made in an origami class, with seemingly every enemy being able to blow you away with ease. More on this later though. You finally catch up with Karina, who offers to drive while you man the bogey's turret. This section was mostly okay, and though I'm pretty sure you circle through the level a couple times, it doesn't overstay its welcome compared to other turret sections. After this, Mason explains that he works for an organization that studies human-made diseases. This suddenly makes Karina trust Mason, despite the fact that she had been reluctantly helping him up until this point. Nope, now they're going to fall in love because video game. Because video game. From here, you try to contact the Alliance and your boss, Stockton, to have them evac you off of Earth. You get attacked by what is seemingly an army of raiders until Karina gives off a massive explosion. We learn that her infection was created by the Shroud and gives her the ability to create large explosions without harming herself. After a pretty bad transition, you are shown that you're being followed by a mysterious figure. Once she sees this figure, Karina exclaims that it's
Shroud! That's Shroud!
And runs off. This leaves Mason alone to do what he does best: have awkward dialogue.
Karina! Damn! Damn it!
You then chase after Karina again, only this time you're being attacked by Alliance security force members. This feels odd because Mason never questions this or anything, they just get awkwardly introduced as the next cannon fodder for you to shoot down. You then meet up with Karina once again and sneak your way onto a giant train. We are given no reason for this, the game doesn't even try to give you a destination. You only get on it because that's forward and that's the direction you're supposed to go.
Ready, asshole? All set.
This is something that bugged me throughout the entire game. It never explains anything to you, it never even explains characters' motivations. It has a narrative arc that we are supposed to be able to understand, not just blindly follow. This game does such a poor job at this that none of its impactful moments have any weight because you don't understand what is happening enough to care. The train level is the perfect example of this. This level is only there to pad out the game's length. Don't believe me? Check out this turret section at the end of the level. It took me 7.5 minutes to get through this section with seemingly no progress being made. I seriously thought my game was broken, was very close to restarting the level until suddenly the game decided I had killed enough ships to progress. This just shows how lazy the level design gets from this point on, where you trudge through a boring, linear level until you reach a defense area and have to kill a certain amount of enemies to progress. Your train crashes because this game needs another waking up from a crash sequence for some reason, and we learn that Stockton, Mason's boss if you forgot, was behind everything and is trying to capture Karina for himself.
She's alive. Alright, Cody. Colonel Stockton is waiting for us.
You eventually make it to the perimeter of the Earth prison called the Anvil. You come across some Alliance security members and raiders fighting each other in the courtyard. You mow down everyone in your path, despite the fact that you technically align with the raiders now, but oh well, they deserve to die brutal deaths too, I guess. This continues until you reach another one of the game's vehicle sections, and oh my god, fuck this part of the game. I seriously wanted to quit right here, not make this video at all. In this section, you are tasked with taking down 5 other enemy vehicles in order for a door to open, allowing you to progress. The problem comes from the fact that the vehicles in this game are once again seemingly made out of paper, meaning you can only take a few hits before you explode. Add to that the fact that the AI is suicidal and rams you constantly rather than shoot you from a distance, meaning every time you kill one of their vehicles, it explodes and takes out a huge chunk of your health. I went through this section countless times, trying to survive and do everything that as the developer intended, but the vehicle was just not strong enough. It didn't have enough health to actually survive this section. So I was forced to cheese the hell out of it. Thank God for the fact that this game's sniper rifle does a good amount of damage, or else I don't think I ever would have gotten through this section. After that incredibly annoying sequence, you finally get into the prison where, I shit you not, the same 2 or 3 layouts are repeated over and over until you reach the end of the level. This game was hyped up as having huge, vast, expansive worlds, but at this point it just devolved into a boring, cut-and-paste corridor shooter. Since this game marketed its huge levels so much, the only conclusion you can come to here is that the developers simply just ran out of time, and that they just had to make levels that were fast and easy and efficient for them to make. After you get lost for about 30 minutes because everything looks the same, you come across Stockton's Shroud Museum, where he keeps all of his plot points. You learn that Stockton had been experimenting with Karina's virus in order to weaponize it against the Shroud. However, the Alliance wasn't as passionate as Stockton and forced him to cut off his research. Hey, wait!
Decades of research flushed down the drain.
Is that Three Dog?
Jockey of discs and teller of truths. Lord and master over the finest radio station to grace the wastes.
Holy shit, that's awesome!
I am Three Dog.
This is why he sends you off of Earth with Karina, only to change his mind and shoot you down? I just don't understand why Stockton went through all this trouble to get Karina when he already had her in custody at the beginning of the game. If you're already planning to capture her behind the Alliance's back, why wouldn't you just do it and tell them she died in transport? Like, he didn't have to actually send her anywhere, he could have just told them he did and kept her without risking her escape. Are you fucking stupid? Anyway, Stockton captures you and puts you in a transport pod. At this point, I was thinking maybe this game will finally start to pick up and make sense.
I doubt it.
After you are captured, you are put on a flying barge to be transported somewhere else. This is where you learn that Stockton paid the raiders to shoot your ship down and capture Karina, but he ended up never paying them.
I know you're on that ship, Stockton. Where's our money?
What, they didn't charge him up front? Amateurs. You are freed from your pod just in time by a mysterious figure and eventually make it off the ship with an escape pod that oh, not again! After another long and drawn-out driving section, which I just completed on foot because I'm not a sadist, you meet up with Stockton. We learn that Stockton had used Karina's blood to intentionally infect himself with the virus, attracting the attention of the Shroud so that he could use their own weapon against them. Listen to that performance!
Shroud! I have given up my humanity! Become what I despise!
While Stockton laughs maniacally, you try to make your escape by going deeper into his facility? This game has a huge difficulty spike here, and by difficulty I mean large numbers of enemies thrown at you at once. This was obviously done because this is getting towards the end of the game, and the developer suddenly wanted you to slow down in order to extend the game's length. After you get through an entire army of enemies, you meet up with Stockton once again for a final showdown. I actually quite liked this boss fight. It required you to use almost your entire arsenal to take him down, and it takes a lot of trial and error to figure out his mechanics, but in a fair way. It's long enough to not be too easy, but it's not too long to be boring. It's probably my favorite sequence in the game aside from the very beginning. Once you defeat Stockton, you meet back up with Karina where the game gives off its big reveal. You, Mason, were working for the Shroud the entire time. This twist is so lazy and cheesy that I couldn't help but love it. I mean, this game came out at a time when all the big M. Night Shyamalan movies were out, so like The Sixth Sense, Signs, The Village. So it was kind of popular to have this kind of twist ending at the end of your game. They actually put some effort into making sure that it made sense too. All of the information we learned about the Shroud earlier came from Mason, who showed an overall indifference towards them compared to Stockton's extreme hatred.
More like a domestic situation 30 years ago.
If this were the end of the game, I would have been totally, completely satisfied with the mystery of Mason and how that reveal was handled. But no, they had to keep going further. From here, we finally meet the Shroud, who are undead, I guess? They promised Mason to bring his daughter back to life, so I guess they are undead, but only if he captured Karina for them. Mason quickly learns that their promise wasn't completely true, and that
My deal, my debt, would never be paid in full. And even if it was, if they could do the impossible and bring her back to life, she'd never be my daughter again.
Real quick, I just want to give a shout out to this performance right here. I don't know the name of this character or who voiced him, but whoever did this performance completely chewed the game's scenery like I've never seen in a video game before. It's over the top, cheesy, and it's fantastic. I love it.
There are a few more errands we'd like you to run. Do we understand each other, Jack? Jack! As you know, she has a tendency to explode. Goodbye, Jack.
After realizing that he made a deal with the devil, Mason decides he wants to redeem himself by rescuing Karina from the Shroud. You are given a massive charge shot weapon and told to lay waste to anyone in your way. This section is the power trip portion of the game, but the weapon they give you just isn't satisfying to use. It's called the Titan's Fist, and you can charge its shot to do more damage. You're honestly better off just shooting it without charging though, because the amount of increased damage you get out of it is seemingly minuscule. You'll be glad you did too, because this weapon is just not satisfying to use whatsoever. So getting through this section as fast as possible should be your top priority. Oh, and this section also takes away all of your other weapons and your ability to heal yourself. You can heal at these little kiosks scattered around the Shroud base, but it undercuts the gameplay you've grown accustomed to for the past few hours in order to give you a power trip. You eventually come across the game's final boss. She's someone? I don't really know who this person is or why I have to kill them. Hell, her mechanics don't even make sense. You shoot at her until she grows a shield. When the shield finishes charging, she releases a huge explosion that deals massive damage and heals herself completely. It took me forever, and admittedly an online guide, to figure out that you have to kill these little invisible enemies one at a time so they can't heal her when her shield comes up. The problem is that these enemies can only be killed when they are visible, which only happens for about 2 seconds while they attack you. This boss fight is a stark contrast to the one before because it is just shit. The mechanics are shit, the build-up is shit, the attacks are shit, everything is just shit. It's not like a Dark Souls game where you have to dig into the lore of the boss either. There's nothing to find. This is just a person that you fight. Who is this person? Why am I fighting them? Sound like Seinfeld there for a second. You never learn anything about this boss either. As soon as you finish, you're just treated to the last cutscene. Remember the first scene of the game that I said foreshadowed the end of the game? Here is when it finally comes into play. You discover that Karina has been strapped to a machine that is extracting all of her blood. She begs you to kill her and says it's all over. Then we learn that Mason can't cope with killing his love and shoots himself instead.
Jack?
After realizing this, Karina is sent into a rage, causing a chain explosion with both her and Mason's bodies. This explodes the entire Shroud facility and I guess everything else? The game immediately jumps to its credits from this, which, hey, look, this game actually has credits, but it leaves so many questions unanswered and leaves the story with a very loud thud. This isn't the worst ending that I've ever seen, and it helps that the game had a cheesy as hell reveal just one level prior. But this ending just took all of the wind out of its sails. I don't know, maybe it's because at this point I had just finished one of the worst slogs of the game, so I wasn't exactly in high spirits. Overall, it's nothing to write home about, and definitely not the epic story that it was hyped up to be. Keep in mind that this game came out after Half-Life and Half-Life 2, so having an uninteresting story like this has no excuse. I suppose now I should talk about the gameplay, and, well, for the most part, it's nothing you haven't seen before. There are satisfying weapons to use, like the frag rifle. Look at this, look at this. Fuck yeah, that is the coolest animation I've ever seen. Then there are the unsatisfying weapons to use, like the Bulldog assault rifle you get at the beginning of the game. What sucks is that after a while, the Bulldog ends up being the best weapon in the game by a wide margin against most enemies. Pariah's biggest selling point was the fact that it had upgradable weapons and equipment by collecting weapon cores throughout the game. These upgrades were static and stayed with you throughout the game. Most of the upgrades were great, and by the end of the game you were an overpowered god among men thanks to this system. If it weren't for this upgrade system, the game wouldn't have ended up nearly as fun to play. This variety in gameplay gives the game just enough of an emergent feel to keep things fresh. The enemies you fight are boring and stupid. Most of the game's encounters task you with killing a certain number of enemies to continue, and ultimately it just becomes a chore to play through. The few times the game tries to change it up, it ends up just being a turret section copy and pasted a few times. With that said, the levels for the first half of the game are at least vast and pretty to look at, especially for the time. The game also comes with a pretty cool map editor, something that I always like to see on consoles. Though it's not very useful now because original Xbox servers were shut down years ago and you can't play your created levels with bots. Not that you'd want to anyway. And while I'm talking about it, you can actually find this game for PC if you're willing to buy a physical copy of it. I found plenty on Amazon and eBay. The only thing is that you can't find it anywhere digitally, at least not legitimately as far as I know. But if you do find a copy somewhere, enjoy it. You are playing a vastly superior product with better graphics and gameplay and maybe possibly even online play. If you play this game on PC and figure out that the online community is still alive somehow, let me know in the comments because I may actually try this out. Pariah was also hyped up as a Halo killer like I said before, but I don't really think that comparison is fair here. Sure, the vehicle sections come pretty close to being carbon copies, but everything else this game just feels more like an Unreal game than a Halo game. Which makes sense considering that Digital Extremes worked almost exclusively on the Unreal Engine prior to working on this game. Was this game meant to possibly circumvent Halo's success? Absolutely. But was it an exact copy of that game? Definitely not. This game has a lot of uniqueness and dignity to it, and even brought some innovation to the table with its upgrade system. There is good and creative design to be found here. Overall, this game was pretty fun to play up until about the halfway point. At that point, it becomes painfully obvious that the developers just were pushing it out the door to meet a deadline, which is unfortunate. When this game came out in 2005, I remember playing the demo for it on an official Xbox magazine disc non-stop and being so hyped. I never got to try it out though, because my local Blockbuster never got a copy, and it just slowly faded into obscurity. I guess that's why I felt so compelled to try it out here. Honestly, I'm glad I did. It's surprising to see that Digital Extremes, the developer of this game and the developer of the hugely successful free-to-play game Warframe, have done everything they can to erase their connections to this game completely. You can't find it on their website, you can barely even find any information about it on their Wikipedia page. Considering they're trying so damn hard to distance themselves from it, it just proves to me that this game was a complete dud. It was not a critical darling. I mean, I think it got like 6s at most from most outlets at the time that it came out, and it probably wasn't as much of a financial success either. But honestly, I don't think it's as bad as they may think it is. I don't think it should be remembered as that one shitty game that Digital Extremes made. I think that they should actually look back at this and think, we had a lot of good ideas there. Pariah had a lot of ambitions, and it actually managed to follow through with most of them. It just got bogged down by deadlines and a developer's inability to complete what they started in the way they intended. We may never know what Digital Extremes wanted out of Pariah, but at least we have an example of them trying. And I think that's enough. Alright, that is the end of my review. Thank you guys for watching. If you saw this anywhere but our YouTube channel, thank you for supporting us, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really trying to do more of these reviews. I have another one coming up that I'm finally going to be looking at a game that is actually good. Like, I would argue is great. And it's actually part of a franchise that a lot of people have heard about. I mean, it's like one of the biggest franchises of all time. So I'm very excited to do that. I'll try to have that out in the next couple of weeks. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, please let us know. If you think we could make it any better, also let us know how you would do it or how you would make things better. I really like doing this series. I really love going back and playing these old games from my childhood. If you like it too, if you recognize these games, Area 51 and Pariah, the ones I've done so far, please leave a like if you want. Or if you remember this game and you absolutely hated it, you can leave a dislike too. I don't mind. It's fine. If you want to know when the next video is coming out, you can go ahead and subscribe. I'm also going to be posting it on Facebook and maybe Twitter. I've been told I need to up my Twitter game, so I don't know. Once again, thank you guys for watching. This is a very fun series to do. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye!